It's been an incredible event so far. I'm so glad to be a part of it and to be taking everybody through this next stage in our journey with WWC. As Tracy mentioned, my name is Loretta. I am a part of the WWC advisory team, which has been an incredible experience. So I'm so glad to see this coming to fruition again this year. I am also the marketing and communications leader at Equa Specialty Risk Partners Corporation. And what we do is build customized insurance solutions for Canadian businesses, including cannabis businesses of all types. We have a great group today. I think that Dr. Toni is still working on joining us on the line, but we have Maya and Theresa to start us off. We're going to be very lucky today to get an international perspective with Maya, who's based in Israel and can speak to us about the European market. And then right down to Theresa over in the Great Lakes, we're going to have a good range of perspectives here. We're going to be jumping into their unique areas of expertise in relation to cannabis operations. We'll be chatting for about 40 minutes, and then we'll break to answer any questions that you have. So please put your questions into the chat. Feel free to load them up, and we'll get to them toward the end of our conversation. We'll have about 10 minutes there to get into that. And we're very lucky to have the wonderful Marigold team on the line here helping us out with organizing. So just to start us off, Maya, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do. You're on mute there, Maya.
There we go. Sure. Hi, thank you, Loretta, and thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this panel. I'm very excited to be part of this actually for the second time. So it's very great. I actually got into cannabis a few years ago with co-founding my own startup, and this was from the medical device perspective. We were building or developing a smart medical device that was supposed to be somewhat of a personal dispensary, which was supposed to connect doctors with patients and automate data gathering. There's a whole issue surrounding gathering correct data for analyzing for patient purposes. And after that, I moved on to be managing partner of Serve and Headquarters, which are located in Tel Aviv and in California, respectively. So this was an advisory working with mostly international clients that are trying to enter new territories, and specifically the United States. And most recently, I'm at my current position as a VP of Business Development and Marketing for Cannabilog. And in Cannabilog, we're experts at international cannabis logistics. So really everything surrounding imports and exports of cannabis globally. I also serve on the board of directors for a publicly traded company here on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. And also, since the issue of women in cannabis is very, very close to my heart, and I'm very active in that space, I also do business development for a non-for-profit organization that's called Women Can. And that's an Israeli network of women in cannabis. And we do a lot of things to promote women in the field, like sponsoring educational programs or doing different mentorship programs. And that's it about me.
Thanks very much, Maya. Theresa, we'd love to hear a little bit about yourself if you'd like to tell us.
Hi, yes, again, thank you, everyone. It's been a great morning so far. I've been on and off involved in listening all day, so it's been great. And thank you for having me here today as well. I'm relatively new into the cannabis industry. Marywell was started. We're only into our second season of grow. We are located on the lakes of shores of Lake Erie, as you said, in Wheatley, Ontario. We got our license last year from Health Canada in June, and so we're headed into our second season of operation as an outdoor grow. The intention is to build the company to do both greenhouse and outdoor, and we're just starting off as a manageable company for that. I am VP of Finance and Chair of the Board for the company. I come from a history of finance and the transportation industry, so this is new to me, but I've been a long-term believer in cannabis and the health and wellness that everyone can achieve from cannabis. So I've learned a lot in the last 12 months and sort of taken on at Marywell not only the finance role, but headed into the organic practices with the company. we're outdoor grow. We're trying to do everything possible to say, we don't have organic certification, but again, practicing in organic techniques and policies.
I'm excited to ask you some questions about that later on in our chat.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like we maybe have a little switch up going on. Do we have Laura? Are you joining us in Dr. Toni's place, or do we have Dr. Toni coming on the line? Okay, we'll just dig into.
I'm sorry, I was just told to join. I apologize.
Oh, not at all. We're glad to have you. Well, if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing, Laura, that would be wonderful.
Hi, yes, I am the Director of Regulatory and Quality Assurance at Vantage Hemp down here in Colorado. And we are just getting up from R&D to turning into the commercial part of things.
Okay. Well, Laura, please feel free to jump in. I think that you could bring us a really interesting perspective from Colorado there. So hopefully there'll be a few of these questions that feel comfortable for you as well, and we'll get into chatting with you about cannabis operations.
Absolutely, thank you.
Beautiful, very glad to have you. So Maya, I'd love to start with you. I think that as we're speaking about cannabis operations, it's really useful for us to have that international perspective. And I think we've heard a lot of interesting stuff about consumers today, and really that the cannabis industry starts and ends with consumers. We've had some great talks about that already. I'm wondering if you can fill us in on how COVID has impacted the European market.
Sure. It's actually been quite interesting, the impact that COVID has had, because we've had some of our predictions turn true and some of our fears turn actually quite wrong. So one of the predictions that we've had, which was turned true, was that consumption has increased dramatically during COVID, or during 2020 in general. And this is both for the illegal markets, unfortunately, as well as for the medical cannabis markets. So looking at the period of the past year, consumption for medical cannabis across Europe has increased by 50%. So where we had 120,000 medical cannabis patients in 2019, at the end of 2020, we see an increase to around 180,000 patients, which is a lot more than what we predicted. And this is due to changing legislation, and also obviously due to the pandemic and the influence that it had on individual consumption. One of the biggest fears that we've had going into the pandemic was around supply and issues that supply chain problems are going to cause to patient access to their medication. Now, we actually saw that that didn't really materialize. So if we look at the Netherlands, for example, they deemed coffee shops to be essential businesses. Although they were closed during the first half of the pandemic, they kept them open starting the second half of the pandemic. Looking at Ireland, for example, they put measurements in place so that people can access their medical cannabis by post from the Netherlands to ensure that's going to be streamlined. So looking into Germany, Germany is actually the biggest economy and the biggest consumer for medical cannabis. Their internal production was actually hurt during the pandemic. So the first domestic harvest was supposed to be harvested during, I think it was during the second half of 2020. That was delayed. So they were expecting to harvest around 2.5 tons, so 2,500 kilograms of cannabis. And that was delayed because of problems related to the pandemic. So it was a huge fear that there's going to be demand, that there's not going to be enough supply. But we actually didn't see that happening. So Germany ended up importing a record amount of around 10,000 kilograms, which is 10 tons of cannabis during 2020. Albeit most of it was done during the first quarter and the fourth quarter. So we did see some troubles during the second and third quarter, but overall demand supply was stable and people were able to meet up with the demand. Another interesting thing that's happened was that whereas before most of the supply for medical cannabis came from Canada and from the Netherlands, during 2020, we saw additional new players entering the game, like, for example, Israel and Portugal and Uruguay. And as more people are getting their GMP licenses, we do expect more countries to start supplying Europe with medical cannabis, and that duopoly to start evaporating a little bit more. Some negative influences that we saw were on individual country legislation. So France, for example, which is poised to be the second largest economy for cannabis in Europe, was supposed to start their medical patient access during the first quarter of 2020. And that was actually delayed, and it's only starting now. So it's been delayed for over a year, unfortunately. Another thing is Luxembourg. So we all had high hopes that Luxembourg is going to completely legalize cannabis, so also for recreational use. And that also, unfortunately, didn't happen.
Thank you, Maya. I think that's so interesting to hear, especially as someone who's got such a good view across the board. It's really helpful to me, and I'm sure to a lot of the people listening today, to get sort of that summary of here are the most important things. So thank you again. I think that's really interesting to hear, and I'm sure affects our listeners quite a lot. It looks like we've got Dr. Toni on the line now. Welcome, Dr. Toni. We'd love to have you introduce yourself if you like. Tell us a bit about what you're doing, and we can ask you some questions. Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Toni.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for everyone listening in today. You know, cannabis is still such an interesting story. So my name is Toni Rinow. I'm the Chief Financial Officer and the Global Operating Officer for Neptune. So Neptune is a health and wellness company. We do cannabis and non-cannabis. We do the US, we do Canada. And we are very proud of having launched our own mood ring and panache brands across Canada over the last 3 quarters.
Beautiful. And Dr. Toni, I think that you'll have a really interesting perspective on consumer trends as well. And I think that ties in really well with what Maya was speaking to us about. So if you'd like, we'd love to hear from you a little bit on the consumer trends that you've noticed over the past year.
Yeah, so the cannabis market is still moving very, very fast, and consumer trends are constantly changing. And our vision at Neptune is to bring really disruptive and innovative products to the market. So we need to respond to those consumer trends, and we will need to provide them with products which allows them to get acquainted with this new cannabis market. Because you know, we are targeting the consumers who already know the cannabis products, but we also want to invite new consumers into this product family. So we focus on innovation, we focus on product quality, we focus on new delivery technologies that we want to bring to the market. And I'm giving you an example. We are constantly increasing the number of SKUs that we are getting into the market. We have recently entered Quebec with about 8 new SKUs. So we were very surprised because they took them all. We offered them a portfolio thinking maybe they'll take 2 or 3 or 4, but they took all of those SKUs. So which is interesting to see that we really kind of respond to what is it that people like to try, and they may not be all successful, but I think that's part of being the risk that we all take being in this business. But what is interesting to see that people want to try these products, and we have to be very innovative. The other Me Too tincture, it will just not be cutting it. People are getting more and more sophisticated. They want more and more targeted and personalized products. So that is what Neptune is about.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I think innovation is going to be a continuing theme for us, as it should be. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I think when we speak about cannabis operations, and especially when we're speaking about out for grows, I think we're inherently speaking about irrigation systems and their impact on the environment. Sustainability is very important to all of us, and it's really a global issue. And I think it would be interesting to hear about that sort of global issue from the perspective of the Great Lakes and the Canadian perspective. Theresa. Would you mind telling us about some of the recent changes that you've seen in cannabis irrigation systems?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I know we use, and I think the common system is the top-fed irrigation system that is out there, and where the drip emitters give the water directly gets them to the roots, which reduces loss due to evaporation. And it's just better manageable system. You can control it from anywhere. You don't even have to be on site to control that watering system. So that help reduces water consumption. But you're right, with the global impact of water we're having everywhere, we need to look at other avenues that's going to reduce our water consumption. Regenerative soil is imperative right now, I think. It lends to more nutrients, better quality soil, which will ultimately use less water as well. It's going to have less soil erosion also, and getting some organic nutrients back into our soil, so less water is needed. We are also looking at, and it's not new, but it's not common out there either, is the air to water technology that is out there, and research on it, which is a turbine factor that will take the humidity from the air and basically recycle it back so that we can use it rather than from drawing on our municipal water systems. It reduces cost, which is wonderful, and it also will help the environment with recycle and back into the ecosystem that we are all very conscious of these days.
It's incredible how far this has come. I think that it's also really great to have that coming from your perspective in Canada. I think we should all feel really proud of the work that you're doing and the knowledge that you have and are sharing. It's I think really nice to have a positive note about the evolution there, and just to see that there is progress being made, and there's better that we can do. I suppose the connection here could be that we hope that challenge breeds innovation. But Maya, I'm hoping that you can speak to us a little bit about the problems that are facing the international supply chain right now.
Sure. So really, if we're looking at the international supply chain, I think the biggest problems that we're facing are the fact that we have such a difference in regulations. First of all, in the fact that cannabis is over-regulated, so a lot more regulated than your usual narcotic program. And then also that there are different regulations within the different nations. So there's no just like one umbrella regulation. Also, if we're looking in the EU, for example. So first of all, as far as logistics, which is what our expertise are in, we see a lot of hurdles because of the different regulatory aspects between the different countries. And it's not uncommon. It could be a really hassle, and it's not uncommon for shipments to be stuck at customs for days or for even weeks, not being able to clear customs because of small problems with the different agencies or with the different documentation. There's also the problem of countries constantly changing regulations, so it's not set in stone yet. And a good example for that could be said of what we've seen happening in Israel during this year. So I don't know if you're aware of the fact that during 2020, Israel was actually the largest importer of cannabis worldwide. We imported around or just over 15,000 kilograms of cannabis, which is around 15 tons. And that's quite a lot for such a small economy and such a small nation of 9 million people. We have about 80,000 medical cannabis patients. So we consume quite a lot of cannabis per patient, because this is, notwithstanding the domestic harvest that we have as well. What happened though, that in October, the government put in place, or the cannabis agency put in place, new regulations stating that cannabis shipments into the country have to go through pesticide tests of about 300 pesticides. Now, as unbelievable as it sounds, up until last week, there was no lab worldwide that was able to perform those 300 pesticide tests. So we turned from being the country that had the largest amount of imports worldwide to a country that over a period of almost 10 months had 0 imports because of changing legislation. Fortunately enough, that changed last week, where the first company, the first shipment importing through Israel was approved again. So apparently there was a company that found a lab that was able to do this. Nobody really knows what that is. It's still a huge deal here. Everybody's trying to find out because there's a backlog of imports that want to enter the country. But this is an example to how random legalization can be and how it can affect supply chain. Another big issue is the whole issue of GMP, which is good manufacturing processes, which I'm sure, Theresa, you've heard about it. Anybody who's a grower heard about it. And these processes, these standards differ very much between country and country. Some definitions, like the European Union and Australia, other ones don't. And this is a big difficulty for anybody that wants to enter the international market. So for example, most imports in Holland, so Canada is actually the largest exporter of cannabis worldwide. And one of the reasons is because they have the largest growers, which have the most money and are able to afford getting approval for EU GMP, which is a long process. It's very costly, and normal growers are usually not able to do that. What we do see during this year is that we have more and more growers that are in the midst of getting their EU GMP approvals. And we see European countries that are trying to build themselves and position themselves to be exporting countries, like Portugal, like Malta, like Greece, for example, or Macedonia. Although Macedonia, for example, right now is prohibited from exporting flour, so they only allow exporting extracts, but that is also supposedly about to change. So once that changes, we're also going to see a shift in the landscape. But at the moment, GMP remains a huge hurdle for a lot of players trying to enter the international arena.
Thank you, Maya. I think that's really relevant for this audience base. A lot of our exporting companies, this is really hitting home for them right now. And I'm sure it'll be interesting too to hear about the developments if we get the time sort of to talk about what you see upcoming. But I'm sure that this is really hitting home. And I think if anybody has questions, I think it's really rare to have access to somebody with Maya's perspective and information. So definitely feel free to put those questions in the chat and we'll get them to her so that you can dig into any of these topics a little bit more deeply. I think there's a thread there that caught my attention when Maya was speaking about. Now we can't do much about the testing in this conversation, but I think it would be interesting to pick up that conversation about pesticides. And it's a good day in cannabis when we can talk about natural alternatives to pesticides. And Theresa, I know this is something that you're well versed in as well. So I'm wondering if you can speak to us a little bit about the use of predator insects in place of pesticides.
Certainly. Beneficial insects are the safest pest control when it comes to the health of the plant and the growers and the staff, for that matter, and the end user as well. The cannabis is something that you're potentially going to inhale. It's a reason why cannabis growers should always look to natural or organic pesticides as the first line of defense against pest control. So it's referred to as a biological control agent, and it comes in numerous forms and works differently from product to product. Products containing beneficial insects are delivered in a sterilized vermicelli packaging, and once it's obtained, these beneficial insects are released in various ways onto the plant, and they will control the pests that we don't want there, that the aphids that we don't want. Various things, ladybugs are wonderful, all natural pesticides, and we stay away from, it's a chemical-free pest management solution, which I think we should all be concerned about. We also at Merrywell are doing companion plants, which will bring, again, the beneficial insects into the grow area and help with the invasion of, and even some diseases that can get into your crop, and promotes again a natural ecosystem.
I think that's a beautiful theme. It sort of ties to our last discussion that we heard, in which Clara was using the metaphor of a vegetable garden and the importance of companion planting in our community, as well as with our actual crops and cultivation. So I love that idea, and it is again, you're bringing a lot of positivity to our talk here. It's great to hear about the good movements in this area, and how we can all sort of hopefully begin to shift toward a more chemical-free solution for pesticides. And then maybe Maya, you can get them to loosen the requirements on testing, and we'll be good to go.
I wish it could be so simple. That would certainly help us here. But I think there is just if I can add, I think we do see a general trend towards organic grow, and for preference for products that are not radiated. We do see that that's starting to shift. Even in Israel, for the first time, we started seeing demand for organic products. So I'm sure that this is something that's going to happen in Europe as well. We started seeing, I think, the second. So we see the Green Organic Dutchman. I think they was the first to come to Europe. They're organic growers. There's another called Farmer Rolling, which I think is the second largest organic grower in Europe. They're going to get their EU GMP license, I think, by the end of the year, which is going to enable them to start being a player in the European field. So I do think that there is a shift towards that, as well as consumers are becoming more aware and more environmentally conscious.
That's very exciting. I think it is completely true of everything that we've heard on the call today, is that is really important. I think the way that cannabis businesses operate, it's really connected to your brand as well. And Dr. Toni, I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that the way a cannabis business operates impacts the brand? And if it does, how does it? And you're on mute, Dr. Toni. It's my main job today.
Our preferred phrase of 2021. So at Neptune, we definitely believe in brand development and brand equity that we create through our brands for the organization. And consumers are attracted to brands that they believe in. So a brand which has trust and a good reputation and a good quality and a consistent experience for the consumer. These are brands that consumers stay loyal to. So this is good for the consumer, and this is good for the organization to be in the market with products that develop brand loyalty, and that's what we want to achieve at Neptune. We want to be a reference in the market for the cannabis brand, for mood ring and for panache, and having those brands being recognized by the consumer for their consistency, their quality, and also for the two things that Theresa and Maya mentioned earlier, which is sustainability and ethical and ecological responsibility. And that's what consumers are looking for today. So an environmental, social, and governance program at Neptune, it's kind of woven into the fabric of who Neptune is. So we have strong mechanics in place for governance and for social responsibility. I'm giving you an example. Even though we are a manufacturing company, we are nearly 1-to-1 on gender equality. We are at 44%, and we want to go to 50%. So where you can see, but where's the link to a cannabis brand? That's the kind of behavior that the consumer is looking for. That the organizations are ESG responsible behavior throughout their activities, and environmental, social, and governance, and that reflects into the whole organization, but also into the brand and the product quality and the responsibility that we feel that we have for the consumer and for the market. And that kind of reflects in the way we develop products and brands at Neptune.
If I can just add to what Dr. Toni was just saying, I think that in connection with that, so with sustainability and social responsibility and how consumers care about that in brands, I think that the European market and 100% the Israeli market are still behind the North American markets when it comes to that. So if we look into Israel, the most important thing for consumers here, from what we've seen lately, was the amount of THC. So they are very loyal to a certain brand that they like, but they don't really or are yet looking into things like social responsibility or sustainability, or that's, like I said, organic. This is something that's slowly happening, but the market is not yet there. So there's still a lot of market education to be done for us to be at that stage. And as far as the European market, we do see that's happening. That's becoming more and more important for consumers, but definitely not as much as it is in North America. So I think we still have a way to go and the market to evolve, and basically it's going to come, but I think it's going to take a few more years before it hits Europe the same way that it hits North America.
That point, I think we're really lucky to have some thought leaders in this realm on this call today. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I know that Canada has really impacted the regulations globally, but I think it's accurate to say that we're impacting the culture as well, and showcasing what can be. And I think Theresa Merriwell is certainly a great example of this as well. I'd love to hear a little bit from you about what you've learned about the impact that strains and genetics have on quality, because I think when we're talking about what consumers are interested in, as well as sustainability, to Maya's point in relation to THC, quality really matters, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that when we talk about strains and genetics.
Yeah, I mean, quality is key factor. The consumers are better educated. They know what they want. It's I think the stigma is slowly going away, so it's become a more and more open conversation. So quality is imperative, and it doesn't matter what your end product is, if it's a 2.0 product or if it's dried flower. Good ingredients make a good end product. There's a abundance of varieties out there, but having the high quality genetic bank and the strains will tend to have a better marketplace, I guess. I mean, everyone's looking for that one unique, whether it's, I mean, we're still focused on, I think globally is THC, but CBD, in my opinion, is just as important. So if your end product is a topical CBD cream, depending on what your wellness issue is that you're looking to achieve, it has to be good quality going in for good quality at the end results. And it takes time. The seed banks that are out there, growers are doing some wonderful things in developing even better strains, doing combinations, but it is time consuming and it doesn't happen overnight, but it's totally worth doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I see Katie Miller jumped into the chat there saying, sophisticated consumers is a great lens. And I think that's a great way to phrase this, because that is what we're dealing with in Canada and I think more in North America and more globally. So I think that we're just going to be hearing more from all of you on this, and it's really exciting to be at the forefront of that. Now, Dr. Toni, in addition to your very impressive financial background, you hold a doctorate in physical chemistry and a chemical engineering degree. Wow. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about what you've learned about innovation in cannabis operations, and if you have the time, innovation in product development. But I think cannabis operations innovation would be really interesting for our audience today.
Yeah, sure, Loretta. Yeah, so I'm trained both scientifically, technically, and finance. So it's kind of interesting to look at all these developments through those different lenses. And I've spent 20 years in healthcare and nutraceuticals. So when I came to the cannabis world, it comes from all angles into that world. GMP, pharmaceutical, nutraceutical product development. So it's really an exciting and challenging industry. So for Neptune, we have a state-of-the-art facility in Sherbrooke in Quebec. And we do all our product development there. So we have an R&D group, product development group, and we are working at the highest standard. So we are working we are working in that facility on a pharmaceutical standard. If you go for the highest standard, it's just easier for you to operate and make sure you've got the quality and the consistency that the consumer expects today. So that facility and that operation is really organized on the highest level. So you have quality, QA, QC, you have regulatory, you have all of the operations. And we have both the product development and R&D, but also process optimization. A department for this. Theresa, I think she mentioned an excellent point early on, for example, which is water consumptions. But in the cannabis industry, it's water, it's also ethanol, so alcohol consumptions. And, we need to be ecologically responsible and environmentally responsible, which also means with our resources that we are bringing in, and then we are recycling, and then we are getting out of the facility again. So we have continuous improvements plan also on the process optimization side for in Sherbrooke at that facility. And the way that I'm looking at that facility, Loretta, is a little bit like an innovation hub. I want that facility to be forward-thinking. Other markets, Maya described it very well earlier, how the other markets globally are opening up, and how Canada is the world most exporter there. So people will be looking towards Canada with regards to quality, consistency of product, regulation, and will try to imitate and copy. And copying is most often the best compliment that there is to what Canada is doing. In the US market is opening up more and more, and there is still some struggle for certain states to allow this, but through the pandemic, the financial pressure on those states and collecting those tax monies will become higher and higher, and people say, why are those monies going into the black market if we can put this into the pockets of our population? So the US market is coming up, and if we do everything right in Canada and we consider ourselves as an innovation hub and being at the forefront of product development in the US, we will also have those best products that we can bring in there. So it will also help in the future our competitive edge, our export capacity. So optimizing operations in cannabis will have a very long return on investment in the future.
I think your conversation there actually sparked a question in our Q&A, which is very exciting for me. So I'm going to ask you this question on behalf of Mr. Albin. He's asking for Dr. Toni, what proportion of your spend is in R&D? Is that something you're able to speak to?
Yeah, so we do R&D in cannabis, but we do R&D on all our product development. So we have a CPD line in the US, and we We have we do other brands as well. We do non-cannabis brands. So we have Omega brands, Omega 369s brands. We are having household good brands. So the overall spend in our budget is around 5%, which goes directly into R&D and product development and innovation.
Thank you. I think that's very interesting to hear. And we have a second question in our Q&A. So Maya, this question is for you, and we're coming back to the conversation of irrigation. We have someone wondering if drip irrigation is being used to grow in Israel, as Israel is a leader in water use in agriculture. And you're on mute, Maya.
Yes, so drip irrigation, as far as I know, is being used in Israel. It's been used by Netafim. We have Netafim, so drip irrigation. Sorry, I just have a problem with my, there you go. Sorry, I had the Q&A thing up. I'm sorry. So I think drip irrigation is a contribution by Israel. So it's been going on for years. We've been doing it with Netafim. I have to say here, I'm less on the grow side, so that's less my specialty. So I don't want to expend as much on a topic that I might say something wrong. So the only thing that I'm able to say is yes, but I don't have any deeper, any deeper
You've shared
understanding
so much
that I can bring to the table as far as that's concerned.
Thank you for speaking to it anyway. I know that's always fun to try to do if it's not your area of expertise.
Yeah, it's just not my area of expertise at all. So I just don't want to say something that I might be misleading.
No, not at all. You've offered us so much valuable content. I think that's great. Now we have an extraction equipment question. We have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to direct this. I think this would probably, Theresa, this might be for you, but if anybody is really comfortable speaking to this, please jump in. I'll read the question out here. Eileen asks, as someone who works for an extraction equipment manufacturer, oh, sorry, that's pretty direct. How important is using the right extraction equipment in your processing? And is this something companies are focusing on in your experience?
We don't do extraction where we are. This might be a better question for Dr. Toni, as Neptune is very well versed in this extraction process.
So yeah, happy to take it on. Thank you, Theresa. So yeah, we are extraction is a key process for Neptune. So we are not a grower. We buy biomass from our partners. So our supply chain is dependent on other partners and growers. And we have long-term supply agreement and partnerships with them, and they provide us with the biomass. So what we do at Neptune is we are extracting different components, products, oils out of that biomass. And what we believe is, and we have actually our different extraction technologies that we're using, and we are some of them are patented, so they are proprietary to Neptune. And what we believe is this is a key step. So a very short answer for that person is, yes, it is a key step, is the using good extraction, because that's your first separation. And that's your first product that you will then use to develop finished goods. So if your base product is not of the quality that you want, or has particles in it, or is separating, or it doesn't have the right consistency, color, smell. So there are very many criteria which go into that product that we produce out of our extraction manufacturing chain. That's what we are focusing on, and in order to develop a good finished product, you need your first extraction product to be of high quality. So the answer is, as it should be in every step of manufacturing, but yes, there is a key focus on extraction and coming and right from the get-go having a high quality, consistent product that can then go into further development into finished goods.
Thank you, and we'll see who this feels appropriate for. We have one more question. I think we have time for it. Leanna is wondering if we know of any comparable ISO programs for the cannabis industry that stakeholders may access or participate in. I think that was connected to an earlier chat we were having, but does anyone feel comfortable speaking to ISO programs, international standards? Not really. Well, actually, then I think it would be great, Theresa, this is a question that I was going to ask you originally. If we have time, just if you could speak to us a little bit about the successes that you've seen at Merriwell in the last year or so. I think it would be really nice to end on a positive note for everything great that Merriwell has seen in 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. We come from a very small rural community. So the last year, we've developed some wonderful relationships with local greenhouses. We have a pepper greenhouse around the corner where we have a nice working relationship that he brings us peppers that are, you know, not going to market. They go into our compost pile. They're helping us to regenerate our soil. We have ongoing conversations for Farmgate, and if we're going to do a storefront facility in Wheatley, which would be, I think, important for the community as part of, there's a Talbot Trail initiative going on, which would coincide with the local wineries. So that's exciting. It's a bit of a ways away, but it's on the horizon. We have a great team this year, getting everything going. It's nice to see the plants in the ground right now and in the pots, and everything sort of coming to fruition right now. It's exciting times.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Theresa. And thanks to all of our panelists today. I think that was a really interesting conversation. We learned a lot. There's lots more to discuss, but I think this was really valuable for me, and I'm sure for all of our audience today.